Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where everyone just assumes there's a right way to talk? You're in the room, part of the conversation, but something's off. The words being used, the tone, the rhythm, it all follows an unspoken script you didn't help write. Maybe it's academic jargon, polished professionalism, or even just the way people laugh at the same references you don't recognize. No one says it out loud, but there's an expectation. This is how we talk here. It's not always that people are trying to exclude others. I don't think that's happens for the most part. Often it's more subtle than that, a kind of pressure to sound a certain way. And when we all start mirroring the same voice, we lose something. We lose the texture and warmth of our personal expressions, our accent, our idioms, our vernacular. We flatten the conversation, and when that happens, we also flatten ourselves. This is the Good Neighbor Podcast with Jesse Sudirgo, and in this conversation, I'm joined with Ahmeda Mansaray-Richardson, the director of the Masters of Theological Studies in Development at Wycliffe College in the Toronto School of Theology. In this conversation, we explore how to hack the system, as she would say, and find our authentic selves in spaces that subtly demand conformity. We discuss the particularities of our own stories and how to navigate these structures without losing who we are. Let's get into it. Today I wanted to really dive into the understanding about, the things that you are passionate about with regards to teaching. And I know, it's camped under the umbrella of development, which is like a loaded word. Loaded word that you can chime in on how you
Oh my God.
how you work within that word, your approach to it,
Right.
And how you make sense of that. But yeah, there is a focus on development, understanding charity, kind of deconstructing a lot of those things, and helping students who, I actually know a lot of students who came through your program, your development program, that emphasizes on like how to do community organizing, how to do community development, the contexts that they're in, which is a beautiful thing. So I'd be curious to know, how did you feel entering into that space in teaching, right? And how did you bring in all the things that you're loaded with and understanding and deconstructing a lot of that and working in that, where you might have a student who wants to do short-term missions somewhere, or like who wants to go into a place and be the change. There's a lot of good desires there, and then there's a lot of negative things that can also happen with that. So how did you come into that space, and how have you worked your way in navigating that?
Let's see if I can do this well. Okay, challenge, Ahmeda. I grew up in West Africa.
Let's start there.
Yes, so 45 years ago.
Really important. No, it's really important that you're in West Africa because you were in the context, right?
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
I know where you're going.
I grew up in West Africa, and if you can imagine, I'm an 80s baby, and this is at a time globally where structural adjustment program, which is a World Bank initiative, is like ravaging the global South, right? So there's all this like austerity measures that are in place that countries need to negotiate with the global finance system in order to access capital and financing and XYZ. Local industries are collapsing, poverty is going through the roof, and the whole like independence dream is like proving to be like a switcheroo, right? And my place in that world is ensconced by kind of where my parents are situated. So they're both middle class, working individuals in tech, so a little bit on the leading edge. So even though there's like massive poverty and civil unrest happening around us, we're still in this little bubble of, we have a nice apartment, we have a driver, we go to good schools. But that's literally my parents like clawing their way out of whatever situations that they come from. And it's important to state this because in my experiencing of my reality growing up, there was in as much as my middle income world is not directly affected by the poverty that's happening around me, categories collapse very easily in the part of the world that I grew up in. So I can go to my private Catholic school, but when school's done, I take off my sandals, my brother and I, and we run like, I don't know, must have been like 15 miles from the school home, and taking off your uniform and stuffing it in your backpack on your way as you're running, and you're running through slums and jumping over gutters, and it's the world where everything is all intertwined, interconnected in your face. So poverty is real, and the realer it gets, and the more, I guess, if you're the kind of precocious child that I was, the more attention that you're paying to it, the more you start to realize who the players are and who's benefiting and who's grifting, and what it looks like, what the ecosystem looks like. So I have very clear memories of knowing who's stacking cash, right?
Yeah.
You see it on the news.
Yeah.
The northerners who come. So we lived in Lagos. I grew up in Nigeria. So the northerners who would come to Lagos to work would end up being the guys who would work in like as what we call gate men, so security, or who would be doing gardening work. So these are the guys who are the folks who are visible in society. And if you talk a lot like I do, you have these conversations and you realize that something's afoot here. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. And who's benefiting and who is trying to help and making a mess out of it becomes abundantly clear. At least it was to me as a child. Like, it was very clear. You can hear the churches on their giant microphones in the middle of the night, doing all night prayer service whilst everybody's supposed to sleep, and it is loud, and you can hear them doing their fundraising. And it's the, whatever Bible verse 5, whatever says, whatever blessing, so bring 5 times the blessing in cash. There's like these play on scripture and using it as a way to get these already poor people to put money into building these money-making faith institutions. Yeah. So very, very clear and very, very early on in my story, I understood that faith-based institutions and the ways in which folks orient around their faith can either be the difference between poverty and wealth. Because you see that same pastor driving by in his fancy car, and then after he leaves with his entourage, then you see the poor people walking out, walking, sometimes even barefoot, behind him, and they've given their widow's mite. Yeah. And like, that is an imprint of my childhood that indelibly marked me. And so I literally spent my professional, personal, and spiritual journey trying to parse that out. And then on the other side, my father was Muslim, incredibly deeply spiritual, resonant Muslim man who was not only Muslim religiously, but also culturally. So he comes from Sierra Leone, and his people are migrant, nomadic people that would have migrated from, like, I don't know if you know that part of Africa well, but from Guinea. So these are like Madingo people, and they've been Muslim from time. And so scholarship is really embedded, Sufism is really embedded, and adhering to the 5 pillars of Islam is really, really embedded in his worldview, the way he lived life. And so we grew up surrounded by that, and in his own way, he tried to weave us into his worldview. And And imagine the juxtapositioning of this. So I know what I know about the Christians in the night raising money. I know what I know about the white nuns in my Catholic school, my private Catholic school, where, when it's time to go to mass, we have to sit at the back because, we're not Christians. And then I know what I know about my dad's Islamic practice, where we celebrate feast days, we go to the mosque, we have big prayer grounds that we go to regularly, and the boisterousness of that reality, it's very, very lively, like
A lot of things
it's
at the same time.
a lot of things just like coming at you. But as a child, it's just life. Like it's just the thing that you're enmeshed in, and that reality also, like this juxtapositioning, interweaving side by side, left me forever questioning what makes us so different. What are the things, because further down my story, I started to encounter resistance in the brother world to Islam. And I didn't have that growing up, right? It was only after I left my childhood home and went to boarding school that I started to see, like, not everybody was friends with the Muslims. But I have this, I call it cauldron. I have this cauldron, this pot that I was stewed and steeped into in my childhood, that really did a number on my curiosity and my imagination and my desire to know more. And so that's where my voracious appetite for knowledge comes from. And then when you teach, right? You're not intentionally teaching, but you certainly talk a lot. If you're me, you talk a lot about all the things that you're finding out, even if it's just to help you make the connections. And in a very real way, that's what landed me in a teaching position, because I never set out to teach.
Yeah, me too.
Never set out to teach, but somebody had to listen to me. So
might as well get paid to make people listen.
Tell me about it. And then also, who'd have thunk it? But my ruminations on the impact of faith-based missions, or faith-based development work translated into a number of nonprofit organizations that I did with a bunch of young people when I was a young person way back when, that turned it from me being like this middle class family, member of a middle class family straddling multiple realities, to being me making the conscious choice as a young adult to immerse myself in the communities that surrounded me. And then you know more, you learn more, you understand more, and then you really start to gripe about short-term missions, because what the heck? And then you get to Wycliffe, and then you tell all those short-term missions people, just stop, don't go. Stay in Canada, work on water for First Nations communities. I don't know.
They're right there. Yeah.
Lobby for education bills, something.
Yeah.
Just don't get on that plane, especially if you're going for 2 weeks. Like, why would you burden a community that's already trying to figure out how to do the daily grind with hosting you and trying to parse out your intention and creating space for your generosity, and being okay with all the faux pas that you're making because you didn't think that it was important to learn cultural nuance. And if you had thought it was important, you certainly didn't have the time to do that, because that requires actual investment.
Can't do that in 2 weeks?
No, apparently not.
What I'm hearing is that, like, your experience of the reception of those who came to develop the curiosity in you, particularly for faith-based organizations. Was it centered on that, or was it just anything like that was attempting to come and bring about change in your context of growth?
So that's a very insightful point of questioning, because part of the colonial framework, and now I'm going to get all academic, part of what we would call the colonial matrix of being and of power is this perception that what is considered as the gold standard is
Yeah.
is not questioned, right?
It just
So
is matter of
it
fact.
just is.
Yeah.
So the rights-based framework, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, all these institutionalized, matter of factly just organizations were actually places of becoming. Like that's where, if you arrive, that's where you want to be. So there was very little questioning I had around the motives of these institutions, around the frameworks that they dispensed with all their programming. It just was, oh, this is just, oh, when I grow up, I want to work at UNICEF. Or, maybe I go to New York and intern at the UN headquarters because that's what really smart, really successful people do. It would take a long time for me to get to the point where I'm like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I don't think you guys are coming from a good place either. Can we talk about that? So they were very much in the background. And in, I guess, the louder, most rambunctious cacophony in my world was the faith-based folks jostling. It was
It was more obvious.
It's
It was
so
more evident.
obvious.
Yeah.
It's like jostling, like
Yeah.
literally, like they're popping up all over the place. And, it's hard not to ask, at least for me, it was hard not to ask, what are you doing here again?
Yeah.
Fun fact, my aunt who died, and I loved her very much, and God rest her soul, authentically, she was one of the first, I would say, like major animal activists that I knew in my life. Like real human, like you would, read and hear about the ones who would go and save the chimpanzees and what have you. But Antigitha would always be rescuing animals and started a Friends of the National Zoo in Ghana, all these things. And she was part of this exchange program with a bunch of young people that came, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere from the US to do volunteer work in Ghana and work with the National Zoo and, do all these animal loving activism type stuff. And it was the first time that I encountered folks coming into a different context where I did not second guess their motive.
It was pure, you're saying?
I didn't second guess. It just, I never thought to second guess why these people wanted to spend their summer painting cages at the National Zoo so that the snakes would, be happy or whatever the case may be. And it is a fun fact because I just said it was. But it comes to mind when I talk about the cacophony of the faith-based stuff. There was a lot of stuff happening. There's lots of people coming to do all the good. Yeah. But the ones that just seem to me to, in my little childhood world, to be just a little bit, I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think there's something about, and that's an interesting observation, the distinction between these big UN organizations that it feels like matter of fact, as you were saying, it just is part of the furniture. It's just part of what it is. And then there are a little bit more piecemeal, faith-based initiatives that I can see the oddity of it not fitting the decor necessarily even more. But eventually, as I think what you're saying is, you find in both a similar impulse. One is disguised very well in bureaucracy. It's disguised in its ways of landing into the government structures quite well. And then I find growing up in a church that's a non-denominational church, everything we did was building from scratch, right on the ground, live. Nothing was I never thought that our church was ever part of the infrastructure of society. Like I
Right.
thought we were like the tent of, and these are
Oh.
all buildings filling. And there's something about that in short-term missions and just like in general, like faith-based organizations. I think it depends what kind. There's ones that are a lot more established, like the Catholic Church,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
embeds itself
Yeah.
more. And so with that in mind, in moving towards like now, as you navigate teaching in development now, how has all of that like informed the way in which you teach it? Like, where do you begin usually?
So the two things that comes to mind in this particular instance, as we're talking, that hopefully have some sort of bearing to the question, because sometimes my brain plays tricks on me. The first thing is my impetus, like what brought me or what has guided me, apart from my curiosity and the answering of these questions, is I was bothered. I've always been bothered by the stratification of society socioeconomically. Always been bothered. Like I started taking, people, young people under my wing at a very young age. Like, street kids would just become my friends, and, I'd find ways to smuggle my food out of the house so that, I could share. Just always been bothered. And I think that's a testament to just the kind of home and the values that my parents had coming up, and the fact that my parents' ancestral homes were homes that were lively and full with family members that had not found some way to break through the matrix and climb the ladder, right? And so, for instance, my mom, when we would go back to Accra, her family comes from this place called Jamestown, as you can imagine. The Brits named it, but it has its actual real name. And the Jamestown family home is just filled with family members who weren't able to go out and make their own home. So it always felt like kin. Like if I didn't feel like there was a separation between me because I was riding in my father's car and then the kid who was having to walk. And more often than not, my brother and I would prefer to like be barefooted and running around. So because of my proximity and I didn't note the difference between the socioeconomic difference, yes, for sure, but it just felt like kin. Like these were just my kin. I've always been bothered, but like, why don't I have shoes on? Why don't I have enough food to eat? Like, why aren't they in school? And that question literally guided my academic journey. So I started off thinking, well, maybe I can be part of a solution if I'm in medicine, because that's what you do. And then I get to medicine. I'm on the threshold of like starting medical school, and I'm like, I'm not sure. Let's try public health, because I think this is more than a one-person type problem. This looks like it might be systemic. So then I do a master's in public health. And I do my master's in public health, and I realize, I don't know. I think this might be a little bit more about how people believe what they believe, and if it can actually get them to activate something.
So from doctors to health, and then to philosophy and theology.
Theology, exactly. That's how I end up at TST. I tell you no lie. So it's like boop 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 boop, and so that's a key part of it, because I have journeyed through many different spaces to get where I am. So in order to do that, I always keep reminding myself there's a lot I don't know. Because when I landed in microbiology at McGill, I thought, I'm done. I have my degree. I know everything. And then I get to a certain point, I'm like, oh, damn, I know nothing. So that's always been something that I've been confronted with, and it stays with me in the classroom space.
And like for students then, and thinking about development, how do you introduce them into this?
Yeah. So there's that, I don't want to call it grace because that's Christianese, But because I know where I came from,
Right.
but it means
Grace
so
is
much,
wonderful.
right?
Yeah.
Well, because I know where I came from, I know that like of somebody sitting in front of me talking about these things, like
Yeah.
it's coming from somewhere too, right? So
Okay, yeah, that's
we
right.
just got to find where we meet,
Mhm.
where we can actually have a constructive conversation. And then there is the blessed curse of the big, giant messes that some of these well-meaning, do-gooding people have enacted on communities in the global South, and that have, because of social media, it's easy to access the real life consequences of some of these things.
Yeah.
So I think it was just before COVID. There's a story about this. I don't know. I think she was 19. Yeah, from New Jersey. This 19-year-old girl from New Jersey that goes, I don't know, I think it's Uganda, Kenya, and she starts this child nutrition home. Anyways, like a bunch of children die because she starts like participating in medical procedures when she has absolutely no skills. She's homeschooled, and I homeschool, so I'm not knocking the
Yeah.
homeschoolers, but just to say, like, her her skill set was certainly not in the medical field, and she was masquerading and fundraising like tons of money in her little New Jersey church in order to live out her dream of helping, and it becomes catastrophic. And she's sued, and there's the thing, and parents and governments and all the things. So there's stories like that now because now we have social media. And so it becomes really an easier task when you have folks who are gung ho, and we say, okay, what is it that we don't know? We don't know. And let's look at some of these catastrophic case studies and imagine that this is the one that came up because there was one brave African mom who was just like, no way. But understand that the way society works means that there is definitely thousands more of these kinds of micro scenarios or major scenarios that are playing out all across the global South, of people who have good intentions and no skills and get a lot of people to buy into their good intentions and end up causing a lot of grave harm.
Yeah.
And for me, like in the classroom, teaching at a seminary, it's those conversations that remind me that I have landed in the right place. When I see students' faces go like, huh. Because for me, it's like normal. Like, how does this not occur to you? And then I see like the little ding go off in somebody's eyes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, really and truly, this has never occurred to you. And I know that this is now going to be this is going to be a thread in the tapestry that is woven that becomes your life as a Christian or Muslim, whatever you are.
Yeah.
And you're going to remember and maybe do an audit of your why, but certainly do an audit of your skill set, your capacity, and your permission. Like, who gave me permission to be here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of how I negotiated in the classroom space.
Yes.
And it's kinder and gentler when I say it, because I'm definitely not going rah rah rah, but it's coming alongside and saying, hey, let's take a beat here.
Yeah, and I think our own narratives of our own growth help to create that humility, right? In engaging anyone, right? I think that's a huge thing. I know one thing that we both share, I find, in a lot of our conversations has been the way in which we both, I wouldn't say if both of us were walking down the street, they would pinpoint us as people who are working in a seminary. and as academics, we don't fit the bill a lot of the times. And we've talked a lot about this, but there's something about working within existing systems and structures that look a certain way, and to function in certain ways, and to think a certain way as well, and to speak. I remember for me, quite clearly when I was doing my interview to be a professor at the Tyndale.
Mm-hmm.
Doing my interview, and I remember I had to do my talk, and I had to do
Mm-hmm.
the lecture for all these, the most
Mm-hmm.
intimidating thing I ever felt like I did. And when I was
Mm-hmm.
doing that, I remember afterwards the feedback that one
Mm-hmm.
of the Asian students gave to one of the other professors and says, "Oh, hey, I like that guy said, but he sounded white."
And they're like, yes.
And I didn't know how to take that. To be
Yeah.
honest, I
Yeah.
didn't know whether I should say yes or no, but it did kind of rock me a
Yeah.
little bit. I know
Uh-huh.
that student now; she's my friend as well now. But I remember like thinking to myself, like, I didn't know. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know I was talking white. What
Mm-hmm.
is talking white, by the way? And I remember
Mm-hmm.
it, thinking through the way in which I unconsciously function in these spaces,
Yes.
in a way that they call it code switching, of course, and all these different things of how to navigate that world. For me, that's been something I've come to realize more and
Yeah.
more as I'm there.
Uh-huh.
And I find that like I like functioning in my natural voice, which by the way is hard to find sometimes when you
Mm-hmm.
grow up in Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
grew up born and raised here. I feel like I have many different identities that I've had
Mm-hmm.
to connect with. And I find like just finding my voice, and when I find it and I
Mm-hmm.
can like speak it
Mm-hmm.
in my teaching, or like in
Mm-hmm.
finding my voice in understanding
Mm-hmm.
charity and understanding where I'm coming from in being able to do that, I find there's a freedom and a
Mm-hmm.
liberty, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
I feel like to even discover that I feel like I'm still going through right now.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your experience is. I feel like we
Yeah.
we jive on this.
There's definitely some resonance there, buddy. Um, I was just having a chat with my girlfriend. Uh, we have, she has a son. I have a multitude of sons. I'm like Father Abraham, but a woman.
You do have a lot of children, yes?
I do, I do, I do. And then my children have friends, and so then their friends become part of my home.
Yes.
And this friend of mine who I was speaking with, her son spends a lot of time in my home, which we love. Like we've like adopted. My kids say we've adopted him, and we were speaking exactly about that. So we've raised our sons, little black boys, and they all have dreadlocks. We have raised them to be confident and to seek and stay in their genuine selves. Um, for better or for worse, that was the script. I wanted my sons to not have to go looking to suss out, oh, where's my identity? Which one's my identity? I don't know, because I know what that felt like. And I think a lot of my angst, my personal angst comes from that. And I grew up in Africa where everybody looked like me, from the president to, the child around the corner. So I didn't even have to contend with what my potential could be. Like there was no limiting glass ceiling kind of representation, that context, right? But I still had to navigate the impact of coloniality that's still alive and thriving in that context. And so I was very intentional, me more so than my husband, because he grew up here, so he understood, to make sure that our boys were very fluent in who they are. And always say, like, trust your spidey sense. Like, I would ask them, what is your intuition telling you? Trust your inner voice. Know it without a shadow of a doubt. Like, do not waver. Of course, they're like, I have like theological / spiritual reasoning behind that as well. Like, that's spirit. But we've now come to this point in not just our world, in our home, raising our kids, but also in the global space where if pre-George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery's murder in the United States, you thought that, the world's getting better. Maybe young black men with dreadlocks can walk around in sweatpants and t-shirts with Bob Marley on there
Yeah.
and not be judged by the color of their skin and just be taken at face value because my children, they're so cute. Then a series of those things happened
Yes.
and you realize, honey, no, 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 no. There is some sort of backlash to what, folks call the Obama effect that is causing people to double down on their stereotypes, biases, unconscious or not, that really I should be thinking about. So, what does that mean now for my child who yesterday had a phone interview for his first job? It means that as I'm listening to him, I'm like, yeah, he needs a few lessons. He needs to learn how to code switch.
Interesting.
He needs, I forgot. Because in the world that I thought I was raising him for, I thought maybe that might, like his confidence, his authenticity, his giftedness, like all of those things would shine through.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it, we missed that day at school. Code switching 101. Come into a homeschool room near you. And my girlfriend and I were just talking about how, we should probably put together some lessons for these boys on code switching, right? Because we didn't teach them that. We thought maybe a new day had dawned, and the naivete of it, But so it's a very present and real reality. And for me, because of the space in which my parents occupied, my dad was a diplomat for a long period of time for his country of origin, Sierra Leone. So we moved around a fair bit as kids. I never really picked up one consistent accent. So when we were in Nigeria, I could sound very Nigerian and I picked up some Yoruba, and then we moved and then I could sound like that place and picked up some of the language, and then we moved and then we moved and then we moved. Yep. So I've been code switching my whole life, but not because of racism, but because of like my parents just moved around a lot. Like the typical story in every movie, oh, my parents moved around a lot. And so in order to make friends, I had to sound like the people that they engaged with. And I found that skill really helps me in academic spaces. And I think I know my core identity now, but it took me a while to get there. It took me a very, very long time to get there. And like God knows, like, I turned 50 and then I might, that's a long time from now. Like I'm only 25. That would evolve, and I'm happy for that evolution to happen. But I'm aware of how, even as my name should indicate that, ooh, there's some ethnic person coming through, when I send an email or when I get on the phone, I can confuse people a little bit. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, maybe she belongs. Yeah. Maybe she's not threatening. Maybe she's not an angry Black / African woman. I've even been described as genial. We love your smile, Ahmeda. I hear that so much. Yeah. We love your smile, Ahmeda. And okay, thank you. Yeah. It's my mom's smile too. But I know where that's coming from, right? It is a way in which to separate me. You're not like them. Who's them? Well, the rest of them that, those guys over there, because you sound like us, white. You turn down the volume of yourself so that we can feel comfortable around you with the smile and the happy-go-lucky, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. These are skills that I've honed and that served me well in the academy as I was navigating my way into it. And these are skills that I don't always have to deploy now that I feel a little bit better rooted.
Yes.
And I think it's just like what they say about when you hit 40, like you don't care as much anymore.
Yes.
And I was also trying to model
Wait, I thought you were 25. But
yeah, no.
okay.
Yeah, when you
Okay,
hit
yeah.
26. Did I say 40? I'm sorry. Sometimes my other identity takes over. I was trying to model something for my kids too, right? So I'm trying to
Yes.
see what it feels like to drop some of these things. But now I'm like, I'll just pick those right back up.
To help them know how well, I can totally relate with that. I think there's something about gaining a sense of confidence and assurance, whether it is, which it shouldn't be, but like through, a professional designation or like a degree or things like that make you feel like, oh, okay, I can start to be a bit of myself. I wonder for my children too, or for anyone, how they can stand upon their sense of confidence without those things. Like I envy those people who can do that and still be their whole true self in the midst of those things, because I find it is a challenging thing. And I think why I'm thinking about this a lot when it comes to you is not only the fact that we ourselves are doing this and us trying to figure out how to be true selves wherever we are,
Right.
but I think there's a beauty in the vernacular. Like there's a beauty when we can speak that vernacular and that accent with confidence, because it says that we don't care that much about the systems and the structures. They're fine, but like they're not as elevated as I once thought it was.
Yes.
It's two things are happening. Number one, I'm becoming more secure.
Yeah.
But number two, I'm realizing I have a more sober judgment upon the structures. Just like maybe even your story about looking at the UN and all these structures.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not actually as naturalized as I thought.
Exactly.
As part of the furniture.
Exactly.
You're not actually. You're actually an oddity.
Yes.
You come from a cultural inception somewhere.
Somewhere completely different.
That now makes me look at that structure a little bit more with like a sober judgment towards it. And I feel like anyone who's working in the social sector or working in justice or development or whatnot, we are always faced with having to rub against bureaucracies, structures, and many of those structures are positive in its desire to uphold human rights and things like that. And I feel like they're good. There's in a way, there's a whole case. And I grew up just learning why it's important to have these structures. But I feel like it also diminishes our ability to improvise. It for us to play around, just play, and to express the vernacular that comes and emerges from our voices. It's always being not censored, but it's always being polished. There's that new thing on Gmail now where you can press the polish button on AI.
I haven't seen that.
Oh yeah, you can in your Gmail you can write you can quickly write an email.
Yeah, just
It's like, hey, and you can press this button that says polish, and it will make your email just like very eloquent. Actually, AI is colonizing us. No, but like no, seriously,
No,
AI
it is a
making
massive tool. Yeah.
it's a massive tool that makes it universal and appropriate.
Yes.
There's a certain, and maybe my slang is not appropriate for business dialogue, but just even me saying that, there's something about the need to do that
Yes.
is good on one side, but on the other side, it takes away from like these beautiful human interactions.
Yeah.
That actually cause us to break character and to smile and and having more of that is very important, especially in working with vulnerable populations and working on the margins of society. I mean, the street involved youth that I work with, they see it a mile away. Any kind of sense of being something that I'm not.
Yeah.
And in a way, they can smell authenticity a mile away.
Oof.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot to that in helping people know how to navigate structures. And how do you emerge that vernacular?
Yeah.
in that free to be free?
So you just had me at the polish in Gmail.
Let's stick with that.
Take me to the time in, in this epoch where you have polish, then you have slang, then you have where you have options. And then I think that we're actually making some headway. But the fact that the option is to just polish means that there is the AI is biased towards the hegemony, right? It's biased towards the Western concept of what good relational etiquette is in a professional space. It's different. You go to, even if it's a minister's office or in the marketplace in Ghana, you still walk in and the secretary is there and, you say good evening, but maybe you say, oh, master, good evening. Like the master is just to, like, you call everybody master. You call the driver master, you call the gardener master. It's just to be like, hey, I see you. Good evening. And then you sit down and you read your book. There's still like the nuance of the space, the cultural nuance of the space. You go into the marketplace, you sit down, even if it's like in Istanbul, like you get offered tea. And, if you're buying carpets, there's like this whole a ritual and process. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is in different circumstances and different places, times, and spaces, there is a different etiquette. There's a different rhythm, and the sonic resonance in that rhythm that keeps that place. It enlivens that place and the culture. And I would be so sad, and I think a lot of who we are would be so sad to have us all collapse into this strange monotonic samenessness that just seems so gross to me. So take me to a time where, my AI companion is more like a babble fish, where it's helping me translate into the different etiquettes of different spaces and places and times.
I'm sure they have it somewhere. I'm sure they have it. But the idea of I think there are some settings that you can informalize a certain thing as well. But I think that's a really good thing to pick up on, because I imagine I do think the polish button is much more it gravitate towards it because I need the most neutral, same way of speaking that is more universal for all places. And I feel what is significant, I remember doing a staff gathering with a team, and then there's always, every time we order food, it's always wraps. Why are we obsessed with wraps here?
I don't know.
It's like a wrap with chicken and lettuce in it. I'm like, why is that always the meal? And I remember one time,
chicken breast too. Like, Black people don't do chicken breast.
You gotta get some thigh.
Seriously,
you gotta fry that up.
Somebody put the memo out. Chicken breast? Like, we don't do that.
What? I just remember I'm gonna bring some kimbap. I gotta bring some kimbap to this, and I remember being apologetic in my the feeling of being apologetic. I'm like, I hope you guys are okay with this. Like, I brought some chopsticks in here. Of course, default fork, right? Chopsticks.
Yeah.
Alternative requires an apology and an explanation.
Oh yeah.
And all these different things, and and pragmatically, yes.
Yes, of course.
Yes, pragmatically, yes. But I think just fighting that is an important thing. And I think that, and I see it in you so much, is this idea of the beauty of what happens when you kind of follow the rhythm of something and you start to improvise and things start to come out.
I love it.
You and me are both external processors. And so when we get into that, there's like a magic. I feel like that happens.
100%.
That is so different than the scripted way of speaking or the things that are predictable and in line. I'm curious how you think about that with regards to going off script and just improvising and what that does, not only to your teaching, but like what it does in the social sector when that is enlivened. Because I think when you improvise, you have to be in tune with, if we're using your thing, the etiquette of the etiquette or the vernacular of the space. You have to play with it a little bit more, and I don't know, that's just funner to me.
So I don't speak Ga as my mom's mother tongue. I don't speak it as well as I ought to. In boarding school, predominantly, if we were speaking a Ghanaian language, it was Tree. So there's lots of Tree speaking, lots of Ga, not as much Ga speaking, but then there's the Hausas, there's the Evos, there's like all kinds of like a mishmash, right? It's the national melting pot, if you will. One of the things that stays with me till this day was how we could have conversations in different languages. So you're speaking Tree and I'm speaking Ga. I have an ear for your language. I know the arc of, your language. I may not know like the grammar to the detail, but I can speak to you in my language and you can speak to me in your language. And because there's this social contract that's unspoken that says who you are is just as okay as who I am. I am attuned to your ways of being, in as much as you are attuned to my ways of being. And in that, there is a permission that is, I don't know how much it's negotiated, because as a child growing up through it, I wasn't aware of the negotiations that was happening. But the consequence of that is we can just do the thing where I'm talking to you in my language, you're talking to me in your language, and we understand each other. And sometimes I'll switch and we'll speak the same language, but it's okay. And then we have broken English, pidgin English, and you throw that in. So there's this multivocal nature of the world that exists beyond, empire's frame, if you will, that I find so damn invigorating.
Yeah.
Like I'm rooted in that.
Yeah.
And so when I enter into spaces of sameness, I just have this naughty itch to disrupt it. I just
rebel.
like, we gotta shake these things. I'm uncomfortable.
What that reminds me of is being in the drop-in at my old drop-in center at Evergreen, and like all the youth like speaking patois, and I'm like understanding like maybe a quarter of what's happening, but I am like laughing, I am engaged, I've entered into a space where I get it. Actually, there is a shared humanity we enter into, even though we're both speaking in different accents and different things. When you enter into it, even though they're totally different ways of speaking, it gets to some kind of heart level, right?
Yeah.
Just even you talking about like chicken breasts brings me to like I know that.
Yeah.
I know it, and I see it in all of the culture, and I feel it, and I know it because I know it, say, in my Indonesian culture. There are certain things like that look at the oddity of a certain thing. Like, why would we not use like sweet coconut sauce? It's like, why would we not do that, right? It just has that feeling, right? And chicken breast is fine, but I'm just saying, like, for me, like, there's something about that I resonate with, and I feel like getting to places, and especially when we're working with like heart to heart stuff with people, doing intake forms and the standardization of things really takes away and makes community members or clients want to like kind of like you like rebel like and just kind of mess this up and like say, why do I have to do this form, or why do I have to like conform to this stuff? Let me just be who I am. And being people in the social work or in that field that can know how to tap into that is beautiful, and it's hard to come by.
It is. And I think that we also need to hold in real like space and time, like right here, so that we're constantly reminded of it. The fact that it takes a lot to adhere to these institutionally mandated ways of being, like to squeeze yourself whether you're a client or a service provider, into the thing. Yeah. Like, it is draining. It takes. And so when we're in the space where we're like, well, the institution says we got to be like this, and everybody's like doing the thing, there is like this generative energy that's just lurking, because we, at the end of the day, like, I feel like those artificially imposed structural empire building, these are things that are necessary. Like, we have institutions so we can build empire, to scale, to extract, to keep the machinery going. Right? That's their thing. They extract. But the human nature of us all, we all want to play. And I think you mentioned that a little bit earlier. We all want to play. And there's nothing wrong with recognizing, no matter how polished you've set yourself up to be in order to code switch and move in and out of the space. I think for me, being fully aware of the fact that we all want to play, and this urge to stay in the box is draining, means that whenever I see an opportunity for playful connection, resonance, any given day over, staying in the box. Like, I'm going to move into that space of finding and being in resonance with that human nature, because I need that.
Yeah, all day. But here's the thing: the case that would be made for the boxes and the structures, yes, empire, and they would lean on all, and I would say myself have done this a lot in the past too, lean on the need for multiplying or scaling or building. And if it doesn't align with that, which, by the way, the vernacular or the, speaking in the way or the true self doesn't lend itself to actually rapidly grow and expand. It actually is it limits you. It limits that growth. It limits empire, actually. It limits the possibilities of this industrial revolution kind of way of seeing the world. And that's what the thing is. So a charity would say, well, that's great, but that piecemeal initiative that is based on this homespun language of way in which you do it, that might work for that guy with those youth, but always will be the case. I hear this all the time. But what if they don't have that background and they don't have that accent and whatever? How can we expand it? So let's just not do it, or let's just let it die. But we need the generic version of that, or generic version of that, which is the lowest common denominator of what it can be, for the purpose of scaling. So we scale a lot of care that is uniform and same, versus, because we can help more people.
You know what? I think that we have overstated or even misrepresented what is generic. And when you say generic, like, I hear like, yeah, generic, but I'm also hearing the thing that appeals the most to the most number of people.
Yes.
And we think that is this generic, like, stripped down version of it. But I insist that it is the human nature to feel seen, to feel held, cared for. That is what is generic. That is the thing that is going to help you scale successfully. Not more forms. Like, of course, like standard operating procedure, the books, the legalese, whatever. Those who are concerned with building and creating constructs, of which I've done multiple charity organizations I've spun out, in my time. So I completely get the utility of the structure, right? But I'll tell you this, like Selassie, who is, and he knows I drop his name, Selassie is now the country director for Voices Ghana, which was an organization I started in my 20s. When Selassie came to the organization, he was just entering high school, and he's in his 30s now. And if you ask Selassie why he has stayed and the cohort, his cohort still remains connected to the organization over the years, he will speak very clearly to an incident where they were playing. We were doing like some training, and the only space I could find that was big enough to carry all these kids that came from multiple parts of like urban poor areas of Accra was like my auntie's fancy conference center, which is like, sure, you can use it. Anyways, they have these fancy chairs that like the boys are like zooming in and out of, and they're having fun and playing, and I'm not there because I've gone to get food. And an accident happens and the glass window like cracks. I have no idea who did what. Maybe somebody threw a chair at somebody and they ducked. And when I came back, my first thought was, oh my God, is anybody hurt? Everybody okay? Like, let's do like a number check. Like I was thinking care. Yeah. I seen some evidence of some rough play. Let's make sure that we're caring for everybody and like there's no fractioning of connection and blah, blah, blah. And Selassie will say that was the first time the instinct of somebody who was delivering a program in his community was to care.
Versus
preserve the nature of the box. Who did that? Yeah. You're out. One strike, la la la, just the big, heavy language of systemizing and keeping things kind of moving. Yeah. Until this day, he's like, Ahmeda, I never experienced that. Everybody that comes into our community, they seem to be more vested in, keeping their little ship going than in being part of keeping us going, even though they say that that's why they're here. Mm-hmm. And that's just one of many instances where like I am utterly convinced. I mean, we can even talk about Jesus. I say all the time to like my Jesus loving folks, as far as I'm concerned, Jesus was always relationships over rules. Always. So any kind of moral dilemma that a Jesus believing Christian seminary student, theologian brings my way, my litmus test is rules, relationships. Oh, relationships. And then I know that I'm like, if I say that I dig this Jesus dude and I want to model my life on him, I'm going to go the way of what it means to be in deepening relationships. And it is not, it goes down dangerous paths for sure. But I have not been harmed by it. I have grown through it. And I would even go as far as to say I have scaled in ways that don't look like the forms because of it.
That's a totally different view of scaling than I've ever heard before. That's and what is generic. Mm-hmm. And you pulled the Jesus card right here.
I sure did. I have to.
You just did that. But you could say that, like, say for example, if organizations, I don't know if we can do this, but if faith-based, say Christian organizations want to model themselves from Christ, would it be possible to challenge the economic and progress-focused versions of organization if the life of Jesus happens to contradict it? And if that was so, can you model and can you define, can you chisel away at your organizational structures through the ways of Christ? And some would say, well, he didn't have to do da. But there is something about that, and there's a tone that okay, if you're gonna extract,
it's moving.
Oh, that moved. Our bubbly's
moving.
A bubbly can't just move on the glass. But I think that if we are to define ourselves through Christ's life, there is something about, if we're to find the universal, if there is a universal, if there is some standardization, let's standardize it, like what you're saying, on the emphasis that Christ would want to emphasize, right? And it's not the sameness, but it is sameness of being, for example, seen, or heard and known and cared for in a certain way. That is a beautiful picture.
And this is where I think like AI can be deployed in a way that's discreet, and this is why I really am thankful for these kinds of advancement, because now instead of being like that annoying person with the pen in your ear making people fill out these forms, there you can auto generate through the magic of the internet and AI and language models something that's easy, that can take information and interpret it in a way that's useful and that doesn't have to take up so much time and so much space. It becomes a barrier to relationshiping and interconnectedness.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, speaking about hacking systems, that's one way that I would hack us. I definitely use my firm. I don't know. I think I was indoctrinated into the utility of technology really early. Like I said, my parents were like at the leading edge of that, like in the 80s. So in my world, there are absolutely tried and tested technological tools that we can deploy in the space of compassion and justice and urban ministries and blah, 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 that can allow us to turn up the volume on that interconnectedness weaving that I think we ought to be about the business of doing, and minimize the intrusion of the institutional fabric that, we live in empire. So we just that's like the trampoline, right? We just gotta jump on it.
We tend to, every time I talk to you, there is something about hacking systems. I actually quote you on this multiple times to different people. I'm like, oh, my friend Ahmeda says how to hack the system or hack the procedure or whatnot. And it just occurred to me as we're talking right now that hacking is different than deconstructing the system and going back to the old days. Okay? That is, by the way, the reason why I'm bringing that up is that tends to be my inclination. My inclination tends to be like, all this is bad, and we need to go back to the time when we were just like good old neighbors with one another. There's a romanticization I have usually of a more simpler time, and a desire for that. But one thing I always hear from you is that, which really challenges me all the time, is you got to work with just what you're talking about, AI. These things exist, and in a way there is, and I always have to come back to the terms with, we ain't going back. Like there is no going back.
Yeah.
And so you have to know how to hack it. You have to know how to, and I think this is a very important distinction over here. I'm a guy who's like, oh, what did the first century church do, kind of thing. When I think about church, for example, I'm always going back. And I feel like that robs me of the opportunity to innovate or reimagine. Because I honestly, what's behind that for me is I tend to have such a suspicion for any of this that is progress and systems and structures, knowing that there's good behind it too, that I just don't think it can happen together.
Right.
It's just like I have a less optimism for that. But I just want to point out that I always hear more of an optimism you have in merging those things. Which explain it, your parents and everything.
So here's the thought. So my kid, almost 16, blows my mind. He was telling me he's a little social activist in his little algo world, and he was telling me with much exasperation about a certain country that is trying to rewrite history. And so they're essentially doing their version of burning the books. We shall not name the country. And going into libraries and pulling out books that they feel paints their history in a negative light. And he was like, oh, mommy, that's so infuriating. And I'm like, bro, but what kid goes into a library and reads a book? Like, let's keep it 100. Oh, look, my watch is talking to me. It is. And I think it's that short-sightedness of adulting people that creates those kinds of waste of energy. Like, not that I'm saying that you should rewrite or erase history, but if you're going to do it, don't go to the libraries. Ain't nobody there. And don't think that by changing the curriculum in a high school, that's going to work either, because half those kids aren't listening. Like, maybe try and censor the internet. I'm just saying, if I was going to be a bad person, if that was my goal. And I point that out because that is where my optimism really in this day and age is coming from. The fact that we now have true democratization when it comes to information and our ability to access it. Like, I can be sitting with my friend in his little village in Kitgum, Uganda, and we can go online. And once we get out of our algorithms sphere, which is hard, but it's possible, you can access a different perspective. So my kid knows about what happened in, pre-colonial Africa because his favorite YouTuber did like a live stream with somebody who's a historian, but does it in a funny accent or like with strange clothing or whatever the case may be, right? The access and the maybe even the the overflow of not just content but real information is something that is unprecedented. And because it's like a tap, right? It's like, oh, I love that water pressure. Because there is so much of it, it is really hard for me to fall into that. And it's very enticing, that space where I think, oh no, it's all going to hell in a handbasket or whatever that saying is. Because these kids now know things I learned in my 30s. They're 10, they're 11, they already know about slavery. They can name, like names of slave ships. They can tell you plantations that when they started, when they closed. They can tell you why there's North Korea and South Korea. They can tell you what happened.
Homeschool.
Greece.
Come on.
You know what I'm saying? Like, these kids have access. And they spend oodles of time maybe online, like absorbing all this information, but it's real information that creates an internal landscape in them that is completely different. The stories, and I keep going back to this idea of like the multivocalness that I think is what's going to render empire ultimately.
Say that again, sorry.
It's a multivocal, like many voices, right? That's what's going to split it. Because in order to have empire, and that's what they did to Christianity, right? We're all like really happy that like there was one emperor who adopted Christianity. To me, I think that was the end. That was where it ended. But we're now in this space where the voices are so many. It's like the voices of all the ancestors that have all been silenced. They're all now speaking. And the generation that is now and that is coming up, they're hearing those voices. We can no longer tell them that isn't real, that didn't happen, that that's not who we are as humanity. Now they know, and now they can make informed choices. Now they know that International Criminal Court is a sham. Like, I spent my whole life thinking like that was the end all and be all, right? Now my kids know, like, yeah, well, war criminals walk around freely, and this is just who we are as humanity. We're not going to be like that when we're in charge. Because of that, even though I can appreciate this idea of going back to a time where things were not, at least the way in which the information has come to us, were not so like chaotic, I'm more inclined to a Sankofa mentality, which is to go back to get something and bring back. So we're not going back to stay there because there's no internet there, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And we need Wi-Fi. But we're going back to get something, recover it and bring it here and reposition it and look at how that can enliven, like literally reanimate what we've got going on in this time and space. And if we could figure out a good enough way to do that where we can evade the bots in the matrix, we've hacked the system.
Just like that, right?
Just like that.
Well, amazing, Ahmeda. I thank you so much for this conversation. There's so many So many threads that we can go on with this, but I think it's amazing things that you're doing, and I just love the insight. Thank you so much for being on today.
It's my pleasure. My brother from another mother,
That's
from
right.
another time, from another culture.
Thanks so much.
I appreciate you. Thanks for the invitation.